when they talk about the
little Lady Kong.
Yeah. Funny, we spent more time doing this than anything else.
Yeah, I know, right? Nipple biting. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of Kill of the Week. On this episode, we are sitting here with our good friend, Sweet Joe Frantz, the man that has been behind the camera work of CKY, Jackass, and MTV's Viva La Bam. So, welcome, Joe.
Well, I'm a little concerned.
Uh-oh.
Look short.
You want to trade places?
See, these guys all have the tall chairs, and they put me in the kiddie seat. Like, remember at the Thanksgiving table? You had the kiddie table. I'm at the kiddie table. This is my house. Unbelievable.
Oh, wait, well, this is what happened. Then jerks invade the house of Sweet Joe Frantz.
All right, I'll accept it from you. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
and thanks for coming. Yeah. I've been looking forward to doing one of these for a long time. I'm glad we get it together.
Yeah, thank you.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Why don't you tell me what we're going to be talking about? This is your pick.
Well, I thought that maybe, just perhaps, we would talk about the death of King Kong. So just so you guys know, King Kong was the first movie I ever saw in the theater. And I was so little, and I thought that what I was seeing was real. Like, I didn't understand the difference between reality and cinema. And so I kept crying and crying all day. And my dad was like, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Because King Kong's dead." And my dad said, "But that was only a movie." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I actually believed that I saw everything materialize in front of me. I thought that was real.
That is the purest form of suspension of disbelief right there.
Yeah, and it just goes to show how stupid kids are, huh? Unbelievable. So
yeah, when King Kong's on top of the Empire State Building,
yeah,
and he gets shot down. Let's go down the line. We're gonna end on you since you are our King Kong historian here.
All right,
which I love. Carly, when you first watched King Kong get shot down, like what did you think, and how did you feel about it? Being the youngest here.
Well, I know literally zero anything about King Kong. I'm not gonna lie. I've only seen that one clip, so I was just like, "Oh my god, he's gone, he's fallen."
All right, so you're gonna be in for it.
Which version did you see?
Just the clip of
1930.
Was it in okay?
Black and white.
I see.
That's all I've seen.
Okay.
How did you feel watching a black and white movie?
I'm not a big fan of old movies. I'm sorry.
Oof.
I know.
You hurt my heart.
You know what's funny? I was talking to a bunch of young people, such as yourself, the other day, and they said, "Who are some of your biggest influences?" I said, "Well, Alfred Hitchcock." And they said, and these are film students. They said, "We've heard of him. Doesn't he make those boring black and white movies?" And I was like, "Not only black and white, Technicolor, 3D, like are the first horror independent movies, like." It's so interesting that a lot of people, group black and white and boring together. Do you think black and white films are boring, or it's just?
I've never watched one fully through, so I don't know.
Okay, well, just in your spare time, study Ansel Adams and the Zone system, and I'll leave it at that. Chris, what do you think?
About the Zone?
No, about King Kong.
Yeah, this was a death that the entire. Well, I don't want to say the entire movie because you don't meet King Kong until about,
halfway.
Yeah. But the entire time, the way that they staged the death at the end, the way they built up everything, like everything that they make you feel for this giant character and his relationship to the little woman, kind of get you. It's a kill that requires a lot of. I don't want to say exposition, but just kind of a lot of just character building and like.
Well, did you know that King Kong was the first movie to feature a big monster who was a main character? Other films like your Lon Chaney Sr. films of the 1920s had a monster. But this is the first time there was a gigantic, larger-than-life monster. And this is also the first time that it was a main character and also drew sympathetic feelings from the audience. Although he killed a lot of people during that film, he was a victim. Yeah. And, you have to, there's something in us all that feels sorry for a victim, And although he's he went on a murderous rampage and destroyed New York and killed people. It's like you still feel sorry for the guy. He wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
He was abducted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jill?
Oh, it was upsetting. I mean, like, I loved watching it. It was devastating. Like, you're rooting for him the entire time. Like, I was just very emotional. It was amazing to watch something from that time. Brandon spent a lot of time explaining how they did it, and his excitement about how they shot it was also keeping my enthusiasm of loving the entire thing. So it was devastating to watch him die.
Yeah.
I love him.
What'd you think of that shot where I love how they did it where there's no production stills that I've ever seen where you see the Empire State Building that they built, so I don't know what size it is, but you see him kind of like he hits the side a couple times as he's falling, but it's obviously fake, but like his limbs are like twisting and stuff like that, and I would love to see exactly the size of the dummy and the size of the building that they had to achieve that level of realism,
Yeah.
But it made you really sad,
It
huh?
made me so upset. I loved him. He was adorable, and then he died.
Yeah.
How about you,
It was
Jess?
devastating.
I mean, I agree. It's a film where you're sort of sympathetic to, I guess, the villain character. So it is weird in that aspect. My first time watching the film, I think I was just kind of blown away, like, by the cinematography, like, especially for that time period. I guess I don't really would have thought 1933 they could do as much as they did in that film. But I agree with what Chris said. It was very much like a character building moment. His death, it's hard, like, you're right, he killed a lot of people, but at the same time, like, he's not supposed to be there. So it was definitely like an iconic thing. Now, at the same time, I watched it at a time that I had already seen other monster type or like animal villain movies like Jurassic Park and stuff like that. So it's definitely a different mindset. Like, I can't imagine being in 1933, like, seeing that film and it being like the only film of that kind around, doing the stuff they did. I think that would have been crazy.
They were actually frightened to release that. So one of the things they had to contend with was it's stop motion animation. So it's an armature. It almost looks like
It's like
it almost looks like Terminator.
Yeah, those look like Terminator.
So the little puppet. So they made 3 of these puppets of different scales of King Kong. I think one was this big, one was this big, one different sizes for the different sets they had. And it's funny when you watch the film, you can tell which one they used because they each look a little different. It's impossible to make them identical. The fur that King Kong was covered with was rabbit hair, and they would go and get like a rabbit hair coat, and they would cover the armature with it and put the face on, and then so the thing is you'd have to move it. It moves 24 frames a second, so every frame you have to move it a little bit, and each part of it. But when you're doing that, you're moving the rabbit fur. And you couldn't not touch the rabbit fur, so it's always going to be bristling. And they were terrified that was going to be the kind of the giveaway that turned the audience off, that the giveaway to how fake it was, the reminder. But one of the reviews said this film is so realistic that you can see the hair on the beast standing on end. So what's the saying? It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned the cinematography and the effects. Those effects weren't around. They developed them to make the movie. And you're thinking
groundbreaking.
But you're thinking, wow, they must have had a bunch of special effects whizzes. There were none. The guy they got, Willis O'Brien. Now picture a stop motion animation guy. You're picturing Ray Harryhausen. You picture kind of a nerdy, like a Doc Brown from Back to the Future type of guy who's like, this dude was a professional boxer.
Jesus.
He was a sculptor. He did all kinds of maintenance work. He did construction, and it just so happened he was very gifted with sculpture and that kind of a stuff, that kind of a thing. And he also understood a lot about like ancient Greek and Roman art. So he knew like the dramatic poses of the statues and stuff like that. And so you might remember in the movie, King Kong fights a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yeah.
They get in a boxing and wrestling match. That comes from his fighting abilities. That's how he knew how to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And so imagine now. At the time, it's been said. I don't know if this is true, but I've read it in a couple different stories about him. At the time, they wanted to recruit him to work on King Kong to do all these effects. He was working at a grocery store or a hardware store. I forget which. It's been reported both. But he didn't want to give up that day job because it was a good job and it was a depression. And he was like, I might do this movie, but then what? I won't have my job at the grocery store. Which is amazing to think about that.
That's an insane mentality, especially like from today's standards.
Yeah.
I think that. It's nuts.
But that was job security during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
But he pioneered all these effects, and some of them involved where there's a scene where there's the log across the canyon, and they have to cross it to get to King Kong, and the hero of the film, I forget what they call him in the movie, but he ends up in a cave underneath King Kong. So here's King Kong reaching down. Now how they achieved that was
Driscoll.
Was it
Driscoll?
Yeah. So Driscoll's in the cave, and he has his knife, and he's kind of stabbing at King Kong's finger. How they achieved that was, now they had, normally you could just do a matte and have just basically split the film in two different exposures and have the matte in one and have King Kong stop motion animation in the other, but they interact. So the hand is in front of the matte. So how do you do that back then without CGI? So they would actually film Driscoll, take each frame of film and project it on a slide. You had a slide projector filming it on a screen behind the stop motion animation puppet.
Yeah.
And so every frame of film you'd have to change the slide.
It was the first iteration of rear projection, which is like what a lot of like puppet studios use now in order for a lot of backgrounds and stuff like that. We worked on a puppet show a few years back, and they would do rear projection for cartoony animated backgrounds just to like bring the world together even more so. It was like the first rendition of doing that and building on top of that, which was fucking insane. Because even the part when Kong is grabbing the female, I'm blanking on her name.
Let's call her Fay Ray.
Fay Ray.
Yeah.
When King Kong is grabbing at her and like kind of like picking at her, you see Driscoll in the bottom corner trying to like get his way up there. So they had the double slides going, and the battle between King Kong basically like picking at the golden woman, trying to figure out like what the fuck is this, because he's never seen a woman like that before.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom, I can only imagine how painstaking that must have been, especially with stop motion in general taking years, especially back then.
Now, can you imagine those lights back then were so hot and they burned, and there was no air conditioning back then. You imagine how hot that was, and like when one of those lights changed or one of the lights blew, you'd have to shoot everything again. Or like one thing goes wrong, it's like you got to shoot the whole goddamn thing again. Now imagine having to keep track in your mind what every finger is doing. So you're not only moving arms, you're changing the expression. It's like I have awards in stop motion, and obviously not to the degree of what Willis O'Brien had achieved, but boy oh boy, your brain just has to zone off and be immersed in this world. And it's like, if you get a fucking phone call, it's blown. It's like you can't have any interruptions at all, because your brain, there's something magical that happens with stop motion animation, because your brain actually becomes intertwined, hopelessly intertwined within this puppet. You breathe life into it as you move it. Every emotion that thing feels, you have to feel. Everything that it's going to do and has done has to flow correctly. I don't know, there's just such a magical facet of stop motion that CGI just cannot replicate.
It's real. It's physically there in front of you to some degree, especially like when Kong is on the Empire State Building, he's getting shot. There's literally like one moment right before he falls off, and he puts Fay Ray down like back into the window, and the expression in the brows, like you can feel he's done. He's like, I've had enough. Like, please stop. And it's all in that movement. You watch the brows curl and go down, and that's when he finally like lets go and falls off the building.
He lets go. He's given up. He's given up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Wow.
Carly, have you ever like, since you haven't watched like many like older movies, and stop motion is something that hasn't really been used a lot lately in films, like was this your first experience seeing stop motion, or have you ever seen things before stop motion?
Like, I think there was a claymation dog Frankenstein movie.
Oh, Frankenweenie.
Frankenweenie.
Yeah,
That's the
Tim
only
Burton's
one that I've
Frankenweenie.
seen. That's the only one that I've ever looked at.
Okay, definitely.
You never saw Nightmare Before Christmas?
No, everyone tells me to watch it.
Coraline, nothing?
No,
Oh my
I know.
God.
What's up with this girl?
That's why we're teaching her.
It's all right.
Sorry.
I dig it.
Yeah.
We're gonna teach you.
I didn't see The Godfather till I was like 35.
I still have not seen
Godfather 2 is all you need. It's okay.
Fair enough.
We're gonna have a new series of what movie has Carly.
Yeah,
not
what
seen?
hasn't Carly seen?
The show would never end.
No,
Oh,
basically.
it'll just be us disappointed every week. You never saw this? What the hell?
Yeah, so it was cool because the stop motion animator was Willis O'Brien.
Yes.
Now, for me personally, I'm a huge Harryhausen fan. Everything from Voyages of Sinbad and stuff like that. I always thought Harryhausen did King Kong.
He was a technician
He was a technician.
on it.
Okay.
Yes.
But then he went on to do Mighty Joe Young as an animator on that, right?
Well, see, that's interesting you bring that up. So Willis O'Brien. So when there's some kind of Academy Award, a lot of people work towards that. One person gets the fucking award, which is always kind of tragic. But hey, man, it's an award ceremony. It's a circus. You know, people pay tickets for the circus. They want to see the stars. But Willis O'Brien, when he got the Academy Award for special effect, he was nominated, and he said, "I won't accept this award unless everyone who worked in the team also gets an award." And they said, "We can't do that. We don't do that. If we started doing that with you, we'd have to do it with everybody. Then everybody in the industry would get a fucking award. It wouldn't be special." And so he declined, and it actually really hurt his career. So Mighty Joe Young came around, and of course it was God damn it, where's Marion C. Cooper and my fucking brain. You allowed to curse on this show?
Yep.
All right. Anyway, the makers of King Kong got together with it was the same production team, Marion C. Cooper and it'll come to me. Anyway, so they went to make Mighty Joe Young, and they wanted to assemble the same team. So they got the same actor who played Denham, Robert Armstrong, to return for Mighty Joe Young. And then they got the same special effects team, Willis O'Brien. But Willis O'Brien really was resigned to doing a lot of the hard work. So Ray Harryhausen was a second, and there was another animator that really took over for him that Ray Harryhausen assisted. I forget his name, but I thought he did a great job. The stop motion animation in Mighty Joe Young was, oh man, it was off the hook. You know, because they had refined a lot of the techniques.
Yeah.
They had learned from their mistakes with King Kong and Son of Kong, and yeah, and Mighty Joe Young is one of those ones where, boy, oh boy, you really feel for him. Because he doesn't actually... King Kong murders people. You know, Mighty Joe Young never murdered anyone.
No, he was just kind of there, and they just they gave him the Frankenstein monster effect.
Yeah.
Before talking about the sequels and further, has anyone seen any of the sequels? Has anyone surpassed the first King Kong? Including the remakes and stuff. Has anyone seen any of the other ones?
I've never seen any of the sequels, unfortunately.
Okay.
Well, there was only Son of Kong.
We watched a couple.
For the original one, there was... And that they bumped that out. I think it cost like $2 million to make, and it only grossed $2 million. They were like, all right, we're done with Kong.
And then that's when Godzilla and Kong came together.
Yeah, a little later. What was that, 1956?
1956, yeah.
But what's interesting, when you look at how hard everyone worked to make King Kong, you got to understand, at the same time, the producers were making another film with Fay Wray and Robert Armstrong called The Most Dangerous Game. So they would film during the day King Kong, and then at night they would use the same exact sets. Fay Wray would put on, I forget whether she was a blonde, and she would put on the brown wig, or she was a brunette and put on the blonde wig. I think, yeah, she was a blonde, put on the... So at night she would work on The Most Dangerous Game. They'd film in the same exact fucking jungle sets, because it's a jungle picture.
Yeah.
And then working with the same actor, and they would do the scenes at night for that movie. And then in the morning, they would go back to King Kong. Can you imagine how... That's back in the day, before the unions were strong and all that stuff, and actors were expected to do whatever it took to get the movies done. And if it meant not sleeping for fucking months at a time, that's what you had to do. Can we curse?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Fucking A, yeah.
I think I asked you that already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jess, as an actress, would you be willing to do back-to-back flicks like that? Day and
That'd be
night?
hard.
If you didn't have
That,
it.
I mean, from an acting perspective too, like to go back and forth between the characters, I think would be tough. If you're getting paid enough, sure, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, but that is crazy, though. You bring up a good point about having to, assume the persona of a whole other character, and to, I don't know. For some people who use the method, and they didn't have method acting back then, they were all trained in the theater, so you would just play another character. But now they have method acting and everything, where it's like you have to get yourself into this crazy emotional state, which sometimes takes days. And I mean, they say that Jim Carrey never recovered from that Man in the Moon role. What was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Andy Kaufman came to him in a dream. It was wild,
Yeah.
the whole thing.
And he's still nuts to this day.
Yeah. Not stopping him from doing Sonic, though.
Well, they drive a dump truck load of money to your house.
Yeah.
Mm.
Dude, do you ever see his, speaking of Jim Carrey, his comedians in cars getting coffee? Like,
No,
he did that Seinfeld
I thought that was...
show.
Oh, yeah, Seinfeld.
Seinfeld.
Yeah.
And he refused to use, doors and was, hopping over his, fucking house wall. And, I don't drink... I drink coffee with this, special creamer. And he's, climbing on top of, diner tables and putting the creamer from, the ceiling down. Dude is out of his fucking mind.
How do you not use doors?
Dude, it's Jim Carrey.
I gotta take a whiz. Excuse me, I gotta go out in your backyard and get in through the window into your bathroom. It's on the second floor. Got a ladder?
Yeah, it's basically how it was. He's fucking insane.
Yeah. Man. So, Son of Kong was kind of a flop, and he was cute, but yeah, it was definitely lesser of a movie. And of
Did
course,
it come out the same year?
the next year.
It's
It's crazy how
Yeah,
fast they pumped that out.
I remember reading that it had a very quick turnaround.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I think we should mention too is in the restoration of King Kong, and we haven't discussed Peter Jackson yet, but we will. But one of the things that remember we were talking about King Kong murdering people.
Yeah.
Back when I was a kid, they couldn't show that on television. So what they would ultimately do was they had film copies, and they would cut out those parts. Of King Kong chewing on people. There's this one crazy scene where King Kong has he thinks it's Fay Wray. He reaches into a window of a apartment building, pulls out a girl who looks like her, and he's holding her upside down.
Yeah.
And she's screaming and kicking, and he realizes it's not her, and he drops her. And the shot of her falling is so fucking frightening.
Yeah.
Because it looks awesome. And it's so scary that he just dropped a woman 30 stories.
That, and he's chewing on a guy. There's one point he puts a dude in his jowls, and you just see the mouth going.
Yeah. And he steps on people in the village when you first see him. But now all those were cut out of the 16mm prints that they made.
Okay.
And the Jabba the Hutt scene in Star Wars, people didn't archive this movie. They didn't keep track of it. You just you didn't care. You were running a fucking TV station. You had to print a King Kong. Just cut out the parts you're not going to use. What do we do with them? They're no good. Throw them away.
Yeah.
And so what they found when they remade King Kong, what was it, 2002 or whatever, Peter Jackson did it, they realized that they couldn't find a complete version of it. They had, I remember a couple times when I was a kid, they did broadcast the murder scenes, but those are all on videotape. So they couldn't find a print of this movie. So luckily, they found a 16mm print that was untouched in England. And so that's the version that we have today. And they had to scan it frame by frame and retouch every frame, make sure every single frame was perfect, make sure the registration was steady and all that stuff. But it's it's insane that movies, how fragile they are, shot on that old film, and
that
how
celluloid is just, it's so brittle. If it's not kept in like cold temperatures, it's just gonna disintegrate.
Yeah.
Now, remind me, was 1933? Did that predate the when they implemented the Hollywood Production Code for like standards and what they could show?
That happened at the same time,
Okay.
and the code was really meant for gangster movies.
Okay.
Because there was a theory, and there was actually a couple times that this happened. Another time it happened during the 1950s after Rebel Without a Cause. As a matter of fact, that's why switchblades are illegal to this day, because people were so terrified of that switchblade scene. Now, I don't know if you ever handled a switchblade. They're the most fragile goddamn knives in the world. It's like if you stab this table, they'll just collapse. Like they're pieces of crap. But yeah. So anyway, it happened about the same time. So there was a lot of gangster movies, and they were afraid that the gangster people would want to be the gangster. So they said, okay, you have to present the gangster. He can be sympathetic, but he has to be presented as bad, and you have to have a presence of law. And the law has to be good, and good must always triumph over the bad. And that was basically, and that has nothing to do with King Kong. But did you ask that because of the violence?
Yeah, because of the violence. 'Cause I know a lot of the production code it's like you cannot show certain like people being like actively being murdered. So in a lot of like the later noir movies, they got around this by like showing it like off shot, or you could hear the woman screaming in the other room and that type of thing. And it ironically became more violent that way by like not directly like showing somebody getting stabbed. But I was wondering if that would actually like apply to something as fantastical as King Kong.
I see. It hadn't occurred to them back then because this is the first movie of its kind.
Right.
So it's like they couldn't really preempt it because it was already out in the theaters.
Yeah.
Huh. So what should we discuss next?
Well, yeah, you got it.
I was going to say, going back to what you were saying about the preservation of the movie and the different things, we spoke before about wishing we would have seen the scale of the building and all of the behind the scenes that we don't have. So back then we didn't really have behind the scenes footage. That wasn't a priority. Today, I mean, you've done a million things of work of behind the scenes alone. So what are your thoughts of that idea of like if we had that behind the scenes back then, or when the behind the scenes became so important that it became a part of the movie itself?
Interesting you brought that up. So they were actually they actually didn't want behind the scenes because they didn't want people to understand how they did it, because it was their theory that if people saw how they made the movie, it would remind them that it was fake, and then their mind wouldn't be immersed in this exotic world. And so they purposely avoided that. Now, there was in Best of Famous Monsters magazine, cut away to Best of Famous Monsters magazine. So with no production stills taken, a lot of people have always questioned what were the techniques they used, how exactly did they do it. Now, what a lot of people noticed was in Best of Famous Monsters magazine, so Forrest Akron was a publisher, and he was actually here in Philadelphia, had acquired a massive amounts, thousands and thousands of these photographs, and he would make Best of Famous Monsters magazine and publish these, and one of them was a spider, a photo of a stop motion animation spider, which was in the pit where they had to cross the log. King Kong turns the log, the guys fall down into the pit. So but there's no film to accompany that. So it was something, if they filmed it, it was cut for time. Or maybe they just had the spiders and they didn't use them for anything. But there's definitely a photo of a spider in a pit attacking a guy. So it's theorized that a couple things were cut from that log scene. The first thing you notice when you rewatch that is the guys are in a super big hurry to get across that log. And why would you cross that log? King Kong is on the other side. So one of the things that they think is that a dinosaur was chasing them, so they had to cross the log. They're not trying to just recklessly cross this log so they can save Fay Ray, because really you would care about her if you have to cross a log and King Kong's on the other side. And you're thinking, why don't they back up on the log? Because there's a dinosaur that was cut out of that scene that they filmed. That there's a reason they couldn't return. So they cut that for time, or maybe it just looked too fake. And then when King Kong turns the log and they fall at the bottom of the pit, there's these spiders that devour them. Now, when Peter Jackson remade King Kong, he did everything in CGI, but he wanted to be a purist. And you can see this on the behind the scenes. It is amazing. They actually got a real film camera, the same type that they would have used at the time. And they created armature puppets, and they reshot the spider sequence in traditional stop motion animation on motion picture film to complete that scene that no longer exists or maybe wasn't shot. Wow. Yeah, it's insane, and it looks great. All the techniques they used, but they also show how the film was lit and how you create the depth of a fake jungle. So to actually take like fake trees and peat moss and stuff like that, and what, peat moss? What do you call that moss that grows on trees? I think peat moss is potting soil. Anyway, peat moss is potting. What do you want from me? So I'm no landscaper. So they would create layers and layers of this jungle to create the illusion of depth. So the sets would be like 12 feet long of different, that way the background will be out of focus, foreground will be in focus, and it would have this, the illusion of depth. So, if you haven't gotten a chance, you need to get the King Kong DVD or Blu-ray and watch all the behind the scenes that Peter Jackson did for the 1933 King Kong. One of the other things is the music. Well,
it was like bombastic. It was very played to the emotions. Like we were talking about it earlier, the scene when Kong and Fay Ray and Kong's kind of like nitpicking at her. I took it as a romanticized thing because the music cue changed from frightening to very slow dramatic violin. And it was the same music cue that they used with Faye and Driscoll when he found out that he was in love with her. Yeah. And it was the same cue that they used for them to basically consummate their love, that Kong was trying to do the same thing with her.
Now, what's Darth Vader's theme? How's that go? What's Luke Skywalker's theme?
Oh, fuck.
They always play that nice and slow. So this is 1933. They didn't have thematic music back then. Yeah, that was new. They didn't. Sound had just came in. There's a building down the street there, a big old building that was a movie theater. It says Talkies. Talkies meant sound for the first time. So they were just developing thematic music for every character. So whenever you you hit the nail right in the head. These characters actually have themes for when they show up. So it's like, King Kong, dun dun dun, dun 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 dun. Like, so that's like it's such. There's this film pioneered so many of the modern techniques for special effects. Like even the special effects, as antiquated as they were, and as our as we had discussed before, similar effects are those are the models that are used for today's effects. Like it's still the same thing, but we just do them digitally. Like it's I
was gonna bring up a different point for 1933, since we're talking about groundbreaking things between music and everything like that. To your recollection, I don't know, so I'm gonna ask you. You know more film history than I do. Is King Kong 1933 the first film to have the presence of making a film?
How do you mean?
Like, it's a movie about this guy trying to make a movie.
Oh, I see.
Like, would this be considered the first, like, meta film picture of them trying to make a film?
The first that I'm aware of.
Like, it was something I never really thought about until today. Because, like, I kind of went down, like, a rabbit hole of movies about making movies. And then we rewatched King Kong, obviously, recently for this. And I'm like, holy shit, like, this might have been the very first one.
Yeah, there's Cecil B. Demented. There's Living in Oblivion. Yeah. There's a
Movie.
Yeah. There's a bunch of great films about people making films. As far as I know, man, I think you hit on something that I had never thought of. Like, this could be the first movie about people trying to make a movie. Wow.
I know there were some. There were quite a few like animated shorts where that was the theme from like the 1910s and 1920s about the cartoonist is making a cartoon and then he starts talking to the cartoon and the cartoon starts
The old
interacting with
Fleischer
him.
movies.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think it was ever. I can't think of any example where that was actually like following like the whole a full feature
Like a crew.
about
Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah.
It's a good one. I'll have to pontificate that further.
Yeah.
I love how they talk in the movie too. So it's like, back then you had one microphone, and so it was pretty crazy. So the cameras made a lot of noises. So they figured out, all right, well, we're gonna have to blimp the camera. So a blimp was like this. I mean, the cameras were loud.
Yeah.
Like it was like. Brrr! So they would cover it in these layers of like leather, and like they would pack in asbestos and like all this other stuff to like make a really compact. But that would only do so much. So then they would build a booth around the camera. And you'd still have to see the guy in the booth. Now imagine being the camera operator in that
And
booth.
just cranking the whole time.
But there's no air. Like, you can't have too many air holes because that's just going to let out noise.
Yeah.
So it's like there was all these different techniques. But also the sound engineering. There are some photos of the engineering board. It is crazy. It looks like the space shuttle. There's all these, it was all analog, of course. And so there's all these like wires that you would have to connect to like cut out certain sounds and get different decibel levels. And King Kong's roar was a lion.
Okay.
Yeah. They were so it was like they took a lion's roar, but then they played it in reverse. And then they layered them together.
Okay.
So it's so it's a lion's roar forward and reverse and layered over each other, so it's like it doesn't begin or end like a lion. So that was interesting. And the other thing is, at the beginning they didn't know what to do, right? So Marion C. Cooper he did jungle pictures. That's what they called it. He would actually go to Africa back when you could kill lions and tigers and stuff because there was so damn many of them, and they would make these jungle pictures and they would like capture. They would hire a bunch of Africans, capture the animal, chain it up somehow, make it fight another animal, or have a scene where it's shot, but it's really chained up. But sometimes he had so much balls, he would actually like go right. He would tell guys like, cover me, and he'd have guys there with guns and stuff, and he would go as close to the animal as he could and get like charging rhinos and stuff coming at him.
Damn.
Yeah,
and that was like that was put directly into the script of King Kong when he was talking about when he was on the ship and they were going to the island, and he's like, oh, you photograph your own pictures. He's like, yeah, of course I do. I had a camera guy in Africa, and I had a rhino charge after him, and he didn't want to work with me anymore. So I started doing it. Like they put that realism into the film, which is also kind of crazy to think of, like the meta sense of real life experiences in a script like that.
Yeah, and also how much more humanely we treat animals during how aware people are of like how you can't be cruel to animals. But so they didn't know what King Kong was. They had this idea about King Kong, but they didn't know how to do it. So at one point they were going to like get like a monkey and have it fight an iguana and film it in slow motion from a low angle and hope that worked. Maybe they actually tried that and like, yes, I don't know. We can't get the monkey to do what we want, and then it has to pick up a doll, and look sad.
It's like how they shot the giant Gila monster. They just threw him on a fucking like cardboard set and let it run loose on a table.
And then they didn't. They actually burn it with cigarettes and stuff to make it move.
Did they?
Didn't want to move. Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I didn't. Sounds about right.
But so then they started screwing around with ape suits. And dude, ape suits look fake no matter what you do to them, dude. Unless you're Rick Baker in the 1977 King Kong. So Rick Baker, American Werewolf in London, everything. Everything at the time Rick Baker was working on. I mean, special effects wizard. And he was really good at ape suits. So De Laurentiis Productions hired him to make the suit. but no one really knew how to do the facial expressions. And he's like, I'll do it.
He was in the suit for that. I remember reading that.
But there's a line in that what's his name?
Brolin?
No, not Josh Brolin. Josh Brolin. Charles Grodin? No, what's his name? The goddamn Big Lebowski.
Jeff Bridges.
Jeff Bridges. Yeah, so Jeff Bridges.
That's who I was thinking of.
Jeff Bridges is the hero in the movie, and he gives a line about a guy being in an ape suit. It's like, what do you think this is? What do you think we're scared of? A guy running around in an ape suit? I don't know what the line was. I forget, but that was, it drew attention to the fact that it was an ape suit. But man, that ape suit in the 1977 King Kong, it holds up. Mm-hmm. It looks so good. I showed it to, one of these young guys who grew up on CGI. He's like, I'm buying this. And not as if he's going to pay for a copy, because young kids pirate everything. But but yeah, he was like, this looks completely fucking realistic, Yeah, and that's another film we were talking about how many scenes were cut out of the original King Kong. So they did the same thing with the 1977 King Kong. There was a scene where you see King Kong's foot come down and squash Charles Grodin. So Charles Grodin is a son of a bitch in this. There's nothing likable about this guy. He's perfect for the fucking role.
Yeah.
And so King Kong, he brings King Kong to New York. King Kong breaks free from the thing, and Charles Grodin falls, and he looks up at the camera. He goes, ah! And then you just see this foot. And I remember watching it on TV, and I couldn't remember what had happened in the theater if you see him squashed. But then that's like all they show you. But in other versions, you see the foot step up, but there's just a hat there. Mm. So in the unedited version, the foot goes down, and then when it lifts up, there's just his jungle hat. And you're always wondering, like, does that mean he escaped? Or did he stick to King Kong's foot?
Yeah, it's like some fucking Looney Tune shit. Like, he goes down.
It's like when you step in shit in your bare feet, and then sometimes it sticks to your foot. It's like, not that I've ever done that. Actually, that's happened to me a couple times. Any of you ever stepped in shit in your bare feet? Dog shit?
No, I can't say that I have.
I did that one time. I was taking out my in-law's dog to go take a shit, and I stepped in an earlier pile of shit, and it was really gross.
Did it stick to your foot?
I don't think so.
You didn't have to pry it off with a stick?
Maybe. I don't remember. I kind of blocked that memory. It wasn't very pleasant.
No, that's fair.
Now, did you have to hop on one foot to get to a place where you could clean it, or did you have to put one foot and then sidestep?
Yeah,
or did you crawl?
I kind of gimped over to the shower and kind of. It was pretty gross.
This is why I have cats. This is why I have cats.
Right.
It was definitely dirtier than the Josh Groban kill scene.
Oh man.
Yeah, so Jeff Bridges was in the sequel to King Kong, which is so funny that all these other characters he plays, later on in his career, these legendary, he's in Tron and all this stuff. But yeah, dude, he's just this hippie guy, this environmentalist who's high. They're not making a movie in this one; they're after oil. Mm. And they're after petroleum, and they think it's on this island, and instead they find King Kong, and he's thinking, well, I might not have any petroleum here, but I got something I can sell. And then they bring King Kong back with them, and they think it's a good idea to put him in this cage. You imagine how much, and you never see King Kong poop. And I wonder how much poop is around. And what does he eat the whole time?
I was assuming, I was thinking about that. I want to say he definitely devoured. There's a scene when he fights this giant, it looked like a giant snake or something, but he was definitely munching on it and fucking slamming it down.
Oh, well that was, okay, so the 1977 when he takes the snake, so he fights the snake. I don't think they had enough, so you can Rick Baker can make the ape look good, but he couldn't make a Tyrannosaurus Rex look good. Yeah. Because you can't have a dude in a costume in the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It had to look like that Star Trek episode where Captain Kirk fights the monster, the lizard monster thing. It would look like that. So they were like, all right, well, a snake we can do. But it's only a snake. They're like, well, it can wrap around like a boa constrictor and wrap around him. Yeah, but what's going to be cool about it? It's well, in the 1933 King Kong takes the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and in the kill scene, it's an amazing kill scene. He pries the fucking thing's jaw open till it dies, and then he like plays with the loose jaw. You remember that?
Yeah.
He's like playing with it. He's like fascinated. How does his jaw work now that it's broken? Interesting. And so that's what they do with the snake. But when he rips the snake open, all this meat pops out.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Like, so that's what you remember. I don't think he ate the meat.
I thought he did.
But you could see the meat.
Yeah,
which is
okay.
awesome.
I mean, he could be eating trees. I don't know. Like, I would love,
Hmm.
I would love to see, like, Baby Kong, to see what happens to make Kong King Kong.
Yeah, there would have to be a woman Kong.
No, they would have to be, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, they were so quick to be like, this one's the bride of Kong, and, like, this poor woman is just, like, sitting there just, like, shoving flowers in her hair to make her, like, a gift.
I have seen, before the days of memes, someone created, like in the 1960s, I remember seeing it, a fake poster for Queen Kong.
Mm.
Yeah. And it looked real. I thought it was a real movie. I think I saw it in one of those famous monster magazines.
I would say it wasn't like a Mad Magazine bit. Like, it sounds like something that they would have done.
No, it looked like a real movie poster. It looked like one of those cheap Japanese knockoff. Oh, God.
Okay.
Did you guys ever see the movie Ape?
No, I don't think I have.
Ape was a 3D movie. I actually have it in 3D. It's actually really good. It's horrible in a bad way, but it has I mean, it's horrible in a good way. However you want to say it, it's bad and good at the same time. But it's your Japanese version of King Kong.
Okay.
It's just called Ape. It is so low budget. It's great. So King Kong in 1977 was the most expensive film to date. It at $20 million. And if you think about a blockbuster, a movie of that size and scope, and they spent a lot of money on the advertising, on the posters. You know, there are legendary posters. I still got the King Kong glasses. Like, they put the poster art on lunchboxes. I still got the Burger King glasses over there. And we just had these larger-than-life posters of King Kong. And if you notice, they all have the same head. You know, it's like every one of them, it's just King Kong in a different pose with the same exact head they just cut out and glued on in the photo. And you figure $20 million, right? So with adjusted for inflation, inflation doubles every 20 years. So let's see the modern day equivalent. So 77, 97, that's 40 million. 2017, that's 80 million. So yeah, it's about $100 million picture if my math is right. I suck at math. I could be wrong. Somewhere around there. So, but anyway, 1977, they still had this ape costume. And they were like, well, we got to do something with it. And they tried to get a sequel to King Kong off the ground forever, but they were like, King Kong's dead. There's no sequel. But they still had the costume, so they scraped up enough money. De Laurentiis Productions was great with money. Now, I'm not saying that De Laurentiis Productions was run by the mafia. I would never say that they were run by the mafia.
Oh, I'll say it.
I would never. but it's been rumored that they had a reputation of being able to hide a lot of money in production. You know, they made a lot of movies overseas. No real record of the resources that they spent the money on or who really worked on it because they said. But anyway, they needed to make another movie. And so they made King Kong Lives, where they used the King Kong costume. And guess who the Fay Wray character was? The girl.
For King Kong Lives, who was it?
Guess. No, you'll never guess. No, you'll obviously never guess. Because there's 8 million actresses out there. Linda Hamilton.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The girl from the Terminator was
Yeah.
made her way into King Kong lore pre-Terminator days.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting how you can recycle the same material. So let me ask you guys this. Well, you wouldn't know, Carly. Chris, you might know. Well, no offense. Boy, what an asshole Joe Frantz is. What I mean was, who is your guys' favorite character between King Kong 1933 and Mighty Joe Young 1949?
Like, as far as, like, monster-wise, like, between Kong and Joe?
Who did you like more?
I personally really liked Kong more. Like, I think when it comes to... I just think Kong was just, like... just such a tortured soul and expressed it very much so versus, like, more of, like... kind of explory kind of thing, and I really like this idea of you took me out of where I wanted to be, and like I enjoyed fear more than curiosity, if that makes more sense. That I feel like I related and sympathized more with Kong, like, you know, what the fuck do you expect to happen when you're taking something out of their habitat, you know, and totally changing their perspective of things.
Joe, how did you feel?
I definitely liked Kong more. I kind of look at him like we were saying before about like where's the mom, where's, you know, like seeing baby Kong. Like I kind of look at him more like almost like a teenager where he's exploring the world. Like he broke the jaw open. He's observing. He seems very naive. So like he just seems like an angsty teen to me. Like there's a lot more character to him. Like it's a sadness. He doesn't understand what's happening around him. And I think all of that's said without having to say it. It's just understanding what's happening around him. Like we don't need him to, like, in today's universe, like, he would just start talking. Like, we don't need him to say any words. We can just see it from his expressions. You can watch his face while he's messing with the jaw after he broke him. He's kind of like poking him, like almost understanding what death is, that the creature's not coming back. Like you watch him start to develop and process the world around him. So now he's taken out of his home. He's thrown into New York. Like he's confused. Like the way he was poking her, like there was nothing sexual. We talked about that earlier. There's no bestiality to me. Like he's processing the world around him.
Yeah.
I know that's where your mind went.
Yeah, my mind went to bestiality.
I took it from a more innocent way that I just feel like he's like this like child or teen that's just trying to process and understand. So
interesting. Chris, you have an opinion?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the way. It's actually that's how apes act. Like any type of like higher primate like that is very much like they don't really have a sense of right and wrong the same that we have, right? But they do have a sense of like morality, but it's kind of it's not the same. Like they're very curious creatures, you know. They'll kill something, but they don't see anything wrong with that, and they'll just kind of like, this is a curious thing. And they recognize things like beauty and like things that are awe-inspiring, and so they're. The thing is, I've never seen, to go back to the original thing, I never saw the original Mighty Joe Young. I did see the remake that they came out with in like the 90s or something like that. And was that at all like similar to the original, or did they go in like a completely different direction?
I couldn't make it to the end of the digital Mighty Joe Young.
Yeah, because I know with the digital Mighty Joe Young, it was all.
From what I remember, it was very much like almost like a Disney polish, like cutesy.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a bit more cutesy because I know in that one he was like Mighty Joe Young was he had like a handler and they were very. Well, you know what I mean, he was very much used to living in the world, and it doesn't seem as realistic, you know, from that how a giant ape.
It wasn't like Congo. I'll just put it that way. Like it wasn't like he was like talking through sign or anything.
I think Mighty Joe Young is just sadder, so I feel like it's easier to sympathize. I feel like it's more unexpected sympathizing with Kong because he's billed as like the monster. But there is such like character building, and so I don't know. I guess I can't classify them together. I feel like they're different concepts. You feel for both of them. Like I do like the character building and that dynamic in Kong because it is different. Like you don't feel like you should sympathize with the creature that's supposed to be, you know, the monster, but because of like the backstory and the way that it's filmed and everything, you definitely do. But I also wonder if it's more sympathetic through today's lens of like animal cruelty and stuff like that. Like we look at it and say they took this beast from where it lived and brought it here, and that's not right. But was that always the thought process? So I don't know. I don't know what it was like in 1933.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dissect this. Let's do a psychoanalysis, if you will. Will you?
Well, I will.
Oh, okay, if you will.
Yes, absolutely.
So we got King Kong on one hand. They need a wall to keep him away from the people. He's a vicious, murdering animal. And as you say, Jill, he really doesn't understand right from wrong. He's an animal. So, and Chris, you had acknowledged that as well. So it's, and you know, at the end he dies. Okay, so he goes through all this stuff, but he kills a lot of people in New York. I mean, he takes that scene where he's in front of that train and he just pops up, Just the way that's shot. And it's like, oh, God. Oh, no. And then he kills everybody in there. And But then you have Mighty Joe Young, who you see him as a little baby. Like, they actually got a little, like, baby monkey. And he's all cute. And he's all wrapped up in the blanket. And they're singing Beautiful Dreamer. And they put him through they put him on stage for exhibit. And he was never supposed to be there. He doesn't kill anyone, and at the end, he actually saves orphans, and he doesn't die. So, but yet King Kong seems to be the one that you guys like more and feel more sympathetic towards. Why is that? Is it because he died, or is it because you can identify with someone who goes through more adversity, or is there another reason? Why is it that you like him more?
Well, I personally, from 2024, I'm looking back at this. There's a pretty strong theme of colonialization and like the Western civilized world going into this primitive, like, jungle, like, heart of darkness type situation, and yanking something from a being from there and bringing it back with them. There's a level of arrogance that I think they're making a statement about in that movie that was rife in society, of how they perceived their, perfect city with the massive towers and everything. And I think I don't know if it's stronger now, if people didn't feel that as much back then. But I know for me, that's one of the things that really, like, won me over to King Kong, because not only should he have not been there, but the people did something, the society did something wrong by doing that, and they kind of set themselves up for these types of this disaster and all these, like, murders. Even though the people in the city were innocent, they were a part of that same society that allowed this to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like society created the monster.
Yeah, that's a great point. Society's the thing. Like, he wasn't. Yeah, it's like, why would you bring him in? Like, how could you not? Okay, so, like, I kind of look at it like this. My opinion is that he was a god. They thought they could control God, and when you try and control God, you never win. You look at, like, the Greek gods to the Bible. I mean, the Old Testament is full of the wickedness of the Hebrews and all of the other, all the people in the Bible. Just, there was a wickedness in society, and God had to continuously put people in line and allow them to make their mistakes and die, and so it's like, you kidnap a god. That's the South Philly theme song.
Yeah, fucking good old parking alarms.
That's not mine, is it?
Check if it's ours.
I don't think.
Mine's a little bit lower pitch. It's not as.
I've never heard our alarm.
Those are the best kind.
I guess.
Well, it's not yours.
Yeah. But when society gets so large that you think you can control God, you have to kill it, and that's why. That's one of the theories behind the death of the Greek gods. Apollo, Zeus, Hera. People stopped loving them, and stopped worshiping them, and so it was the worship that gave them nourishment. That's what they ate. That's what kept them alive, is love. And people stopped loving them, and they began to reject them. So they wither away into nothingness. An obscure void. Vaporous nothingness. And so it's like, so, like, they had to kill King Kong because they couldn't control him. And I don't know. That's what. I think that's kind of the morality tale that accompanies King Kong, in my dumb view, for whatever it's worth.
I mean, I had an English teacher that talked about King Kong being a starting, not a starting point, but, like, showing a point of just the early forms of racism. That it was depicted as you had these white men kidnap this black creature, being the ape, being the gorilla, and taking it from its land, bringing it to America, putting it on display, and treating it as an object. Which, you know, it was. They had him on stage or snapping photos and this and that, and he was treated as an object, and then raged out, and that's how they depicted African Americans back in that time and prior, that it was made as a viewpoint of racism. And that was her viewpoint of King Kong.
I suppose it could be interpreted that way in a number of ways, but from everything I've read, that was not the intention of the filmmakers.
I didn't think so either. Personally, I didn't think so.
But yeah, a lot of people do say that. I think there was a movie.
I don't think I got that off the bat. I think I more leaned towards like what Chris said. Like it was definitely colonialism and like taking what doesn't belong to you and thinking you can stake your claim on it was definitely a metaphor that I could see there. I don't think I would have jumped right to racism, but I can see how people could say that.
And have you all seen the 1977 King Kong?
I've seen it.
Okay, so you remember when King Kong breaks out of the big cage? So they actually built, that wasn't any kind of special effect, they actually built a life-size King Kong. And it was really difficult with a lot of union hours. Again, we talk about skimming off the top of the budget of the movie. So, but it was so rushed, and they had to get it done fast, and they made molds for a right hand, and they made molds for a left hand, and they made all the molds and all the pieces, and they were all, it was finally supposed to be assembled at the World Trade Center, because you can't assemble it in a warehouse. It's too damn tall.
Yeah.
So you're just like, all right, we got all the parts. Let's go build the goddamn thing. Well, how's it going to just stand? It's supposed to only stand for like 20. It's like a 5-second shot. We just need it in that cage. The cage will hold it up. The cage will stop it from looking fake. Well, they got there, and they realized they had made 2 right hands. So if you look, and they were like, dude, well, we can hide it. We can hide it. He's 50 feet tall. What are we going to do? We got 2 right hands.
Jesus Christ.
So, like, maybe we can just always show it from an angle where you only see one hand. It's like, you can't avoid seeing the 2 hands because the arms were permanently bent like this, because the thing could move.
Yeah.
It had some kind of hydraulic pumps in it or something like that where it can move a little bit, but they're like, what are we going to do? This is going to look so fake. This is a disaster. So they somehow got a bunch of, I don't know what, chainsaws, butcher knives. I don't know how you change a left hand into a right hand. But if you look close, the one hand is so fucked up, it's like, then the hand is like this. It looks like King Kong was born with a deformity, and they only show that shot of him freestand, of the 50-foot statue freestanding for 2 seconds.
Yeah,
that's all you see him for. Oh my God, what a nightmare! So, what's scarier, King Kong breaking out of the cage, or King Kong on stage with the chains, you know, one by one, boom, like, uh-oh, like it's okay, everyone, you know, it's gonna be fine, he's perfectly, and he gets the other one, it's like, oh no, and then he just starts breaking out of, what's scarier, that or the 1977 when he's in the cage, and then he starts busting out of it. So he's actually in cuffs, and then Charles Grodin says something like, "It's okay, everyone. That's USA approved top grade steel," or whatever he says. And
that's the scary part. So, USA grade.
Yeah. That's
the scary part.
No, but which do you think would frighten you more if you were in the audience, watching 1977 King Kong breakout or the 1933 King Kong breakout?
77, I think.
Really?
I see. This is how I would look at it. I think it would be scarier for the 77 version because you're seeing him fully encaged. That when you go in there, you're thinking like, oh, he's fully encaged. He's not. Nothing's gonna happen. Not at all. And then that's immediately broken. Versus like the 1933 version, if I had the same brain then, like as I do now, I'd see him chained up like fucking Hellraiser. And just be like, no, I know something bad's going to happen. I'm not staying. Versus, oh, he's fully encapsulated. There's nothing that can
But you're also trapped in a movie theater in the 1933 one. Like
true.
in the 1977 one, there's a variety of ways you can get away, and there's buildings you could run around. It's like...
True. I think the idea of like
It's like the Blob. Remember the Blob in the theater?
yeah, I think I don't know. I think 77 like watching him be able to like break out of it, the suspension I feel like is a lot more inducing and would strike me a little bit harder because it's like, oh no, he was fully encapsulated versus just like a few hooks on the hands and ankles. That my illusion of safety is more broken from that than it would be from the other version.
I see.
See, I disagree. I feel like the 33 version, because there's already, once you see this giant monster on stage chained up like that, there's a sense of tension.
Yeah.
You know, like, that thing could break, like, this can't possibly be safe. Again, I don't know, people seem to have a lower standard of safety back in the early 20th century. So maybe they weren't thinking about it as much, but if I were in that crowd, I would just be like, this is a bad idea. And then, so you got that tension, that suspense the entire time, and with a crowd, a packed theater. Again, 33. There aren't any like emergency exits or anything. You're not getting out of there if something goes wrong. Something goes wrong, and it just.
You seem to agree with that, Jill.
Yeah, I agree. I think 33 would be scarier because I think, like Brandon, you can't think with today's brain. Like back then, it was naive. It was
true.
This was new and shiny. I feel like they didn't think they were unsafe. They thought they could control it. So I feel like they thought, oh, this is good. It's clearly not, because the entire time they're just like, well, we have the gas bombs. We're good. We can control them. I think everything, the idea of putting people in a packed theater, like you didn't go into it with the idea of having a massacre. You're like, this is fine. He's a sideshow. So the second that starts to break, you're just like, wait a minute, they told me this was safe. It's like getting on a roller coaster at a carnival. You go on the roller coaster knowing you could fall out at any minute.
Yeah.
But you're trusting that 16-year-old that's really drunk to like press the right buttons. You know, like you're assuming that this child was trained in his 20 minutes before his shift started, that your life is now in his hands. So I think of it the same way. Like we're trusting that environment and him showing that he's breaking out, and that idea of you can't control God, you can't control this creature. And you've now just fucked yourselves over. And like Chris is right, there's no safety exit. There's no way out. Like you're done. As soon as it's like Titanic, you're going down. That's it. There's no way out.
They had too much trust in their society and too much confidence.
Exactly. There's a lot of confidence. I don't know. What do you think,
Completely
Charlie?
turn their world on their heads.
I agree with Brandon about the 1977 one. Because like he's in a cage. Like you think like, oh, it's fine. Like it's kind of like a zoo. You're like, oh.
Oh, you saw that part.
I was just
No, I
going
think
off
she-
with your
Context
imagery.
clues.
I saw it all. You know.
I see. Have you seen what the 1977 King Kong looks like, though? Okay, that's okay. We can't. No one can see every movie.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the worst.
She'll learn.
When like you're like out somewhere and someone's like, "Yo, have you seen it? Yo, how about in this movie?" It's like, I haven't seen it. What? Wait a minute.
My father.
You mean to tell me you call yourself a filmmaker and you haven't seen this movie? It's like, dude, no person can have seen every movie. But Jess, what's your opinion?
I didn't see the 1977 one, but I would kind of agree that just from the concept of it, I think then the first one would be a little more scary. I think, I don't know, you do go in with a mindset of safety and feeling like they've got this under control. If you walk in and he's in a cage, I feel like you're already presuming this is a more dangerous creature. He's in a full cage. He's not just kind of chained up. So that's like a little extra measure of safety, I guess, as well. But when you walk in that first one, he's just chained up. It's like a sideshow attraction. I don't think you wouldn't feel safe. I think in our mind today, if I walked in today and I was like, who said this was a good idea? Like, this
Yeah.
But yeah, I think seeing him break out of the chains in the first one would be absolutely terrifying, and you're just done for.
Now, there's one question that I have that there's only one person here qualified to answer. Jill, you being the only woman who's seen both films from a feminine perspective, who would it be scarier to have been, Jessica Lange or Fay Wray? Because the King Kongs were a little, they acted a little bit different.
I don't know. I kind of feel like Fay Wray. I mean, I feel like she has such an innocence to her as well. Like everything from the original is so much about innocence. Like she came in, she's like, oh, I don't know. Like she's just, she was, she wasn't arrested. She's like, everything's great. I did a little bit of extra work. Like she's so easygoing and airy, and goes on the ships, she's having the greatest time of her life on the ship on the way over. Like, she's so innocent, and then she's tied up and she becomes the golden woman, and everyone's, you know, pawning after her in different ways and different versions of that. Like, it's terrifying. Like,
yeah.
And I mean, like, she's about to be sold off. They're like, well, we'll trade 6 women for the blonde one. And, you know, she has no, to say, self-respect for herself. She's like, well, I guess, you know, she's scared, but also, like, no one was really protecting her. She was standing behind someone, but, you know, you have this moment, you're like, well, I really am just in a bunch of strangers. Like, they could just decide to sell me off and trade 6 women and leave with them.
And that
I
whole
really
boat did not want her there.
I have no purpose. Like, the whole time she was like, well, everyone's been nice to me. She's so innocent and so delicate.
You know, I
It's
never
just-
thought about that.
Yeah.
You're so right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like she's
has no life
she's also
experience.
the victim too.
Yeah.
Because she thinks she's gonna be, you know, come on, honey, you're gonna come with me to the top.
Yeah.
You're gonna be the
Yeah,
next
and she's
big
like,
thing.
and
We're
they
gonna
just
put you in
don't-
Hollywood. She ends up in this horrible jungle with a
Basically,
monster,
yeah.
and then she has to depend on the monster to save her, and then people to save her. The whole time she's just like waiting for people. Yeah, she's the victim.
She really is the original, like, damsel in distress. Like,
Wow.
every time someone had to save her, she never was able to save herself.
And what was Jessica Lange doing? She was on some yacht partying with some
Yeah.
millionaires,
Yeah.
drinking,
Oh, yeah.
living a life of debauchery. What a deplorable figure she was.
It was just Jessica Lange being Jessica Lange.
Yeah.
I think there's just a difference since I think everything just from the original really comes down to the innocence. Like, she really had no idea what was happening.
Yeah.
She's just being shuffled along. Like, she meets a stranger and she's like, oh yeah, sure, of course I'll follow you
Yeah.
across the world. Like,
You're right.
you
I
have
like her more.
You have no comprehension of anything. There's no one that's like cares where you are. No one to check in with. No one
Yeah.
to say you got there okay. Like, and she could have died there. No one would have even known. They could have walked. They could have come back, and there's no record of her being on the boat.
Yeah.
She has no history of anything. She's just the blonde lady that just jumped on the boat. Look, blonde lady. There's no one there.
And that
On
was
a
back
ship
in the
full of
day
men.
when
Yeah.
the Census Bureau, they had your social security number,
Yeah.
and maybe they could find a copy of your birth certificate if they mailed out enough letters to enough hospitals where they think there was a state that you may have been
no one
born
was
in.
going to be looking where she was.
And there was nowhere to find anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, back then, you could just make up an identity and move. If you fucked up somewhere, you could just move to a new town and just say, I'm this person. Like, oh, do you have... I had a driver's license, but that burned up in a fire with my birth certificate. You have to take my word for it. Okay, sure, you can rent my... You can come into my house and rent my room. Like, that's the way it was back then. It happened all the time.
Yeah.
So, wow, yeah. They could have just left her on the island
Yeah.
and just say, okay, wow.
So,
Yeah, I
like,
mean-
she had a youthful naivete, which is, like,
Yeah.
she was up for anything, didn't even think about any risks whatsoever, and she was exploited.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think she says it herself when she's on the boat over, and she's like, well, this is the time of my life. And they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
This is not the fun part. This isn't the good thing. This is work. And she's having the time of her life on the boat, just being around people. Like, we have no idea
Yeah.
what her history was. And
Yeah.
she goes along with everything. She's like, yeah, sure, I could stand there and pose for photos and act like this. And then 2 seconds later, she's being manhandled by a giant gorilla. Like, you know.
And it's such a horrible time, too. It's the Depression.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, like, you think AIDS was bad in the 80s? Syphilis killed 10 times as many people. There was tuberculosis. They had the fucking flu. Like, James Cagney had, like, I think, like, 8 brothers and sisters, and, like, 4 of them died from the flu or whatever it was. Like, it was, like, yeah, no, it was crazy. So it was, like, you know, it was a hard time in America. You know, at the same time, you had the Dust Bowl. You had 6 million Americans die in out west. You know, the Okies, the Grapes of Wrath days. You know, you had 6 million fucking people starve and perish to death. You know, yeah, it was a very hard time, and life was cheap. You know, it was very fragile and very cheap, and it was accepted that, like, you would know people who would die at a very young age. 40 was old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
I feel like she knew she was disposable, and she kind of just went along for the ride.
Wow. I got to rewatch King Kong just over what you said. I have to rewatch it now. Wow, I never thought about it like that. Oof.
Let's we can start bringing it home, and we're hitting our hour mark, so we can start bringing it home to, like, final thoughts of King Kong 33 as a whole, a King Kong series as a whole. Carly, I want to start with you, mainly because, like, you're...
Yes, Carly, tell us more.
No,
I know so much.
I want to hear from you because you've gone into it the most blind, and you had a lot of information thrown at you about not just the 33 film alone, but the entire series, the behind the scenes things that they did in terms of filmmaking. You being an early filmmaker still in school, what is your takeaway from this entire conversation of King Kong and filmmaking from the 30s through the 70s?
That's not a big question at all. I think I definitely want to go back and watch this movie after what everybody has said, because I think I'll have a totally different perspective. Because I do have a little bit of trouble having a grasp on a lot of deeper meaning with film, and I think hearing how everybody else kind of interprets it can help me understand it better and maybe help me gain more of an interest in the future.
Yeah, that's what's special about, I think, this show. This show is right now in its infancy. Excuse me. I've had too much to smoke here. This isn't even weed. And I love this group that you guys have. I love the synergy and the fact that you're always learning from each other. And that's one of the special things about having friends with a common interest, especially in film. It's like being able to have these conversations and learn from each other. So you brought up a good point. You're first, maybe, through the whole day. No, I'm teasing.
How about you, Chris?
Yes, Chris, tell us.
Well, I'm going to have to go and rewatch the 77 version, because I saw that when I was a very little kid. And my take from that at the time was, hey, it's King Kong, but it's in color, and it's new.
Okay.
Neat.
Yeah.
So I really need to rewatch that original remake, not the remake, so that I can really kind of see those same perspectives that y'all saw.
Yeah.
I mean, the original King Kong is just kind of iconic in and of itself. It created a genre, kind of. It was the first of its kind. I definitely, from what you guys said, want to go watch the 1977 one. I have not seen that one, but I like the original. For me, it was just eye-opening in a lot of different aspects. I'm one to say, an old black and white film, you're kind of like, is it even relevant? But the first time I watched this, I think I was in college, and it was kind of like, wow, they did a lot more than you thought they could do back then. So it was definitely cool to watch from that perspective.
Yeah.
I love the entire universe. I think especially all of us being filmmakers in different capacities, I look at it from a different way of how they shot it and the magic of what they were able to create in the 30s. I imagine what it would have been like if we had actually had that behind the scenes stuff. So much of my brain is what was happening behind it? What was happening just over there? And the building of it. And I think it's just an unbelievable universe that they created. And the jumping off point that it's done things of today's universe of things like Avatar and other movies that would not have been able to exist if King Kong didn't exist. And then Godzilla versus King Kong and combining worlds and combining fandoms and how magical it must have been to see it for the first time. I wish I could go back in time to see that. I love all of it. I love the creativity. I love how they were able to develop everything. The kill is amazing. It's just how much they did without having to say words. And what we've talked before about the music and the composing. There's so much that they learned and developed along the way. It's just unbelievable. So, yeah.
What about you?
I think, when I was in college taking courses and film courses, the big hype was Citizen Kane. You always had to watch Citizen Kane, and everyone says it's one of the greatest films in history. And I think it's wrong. I think that should be replaced with King Kong, because I feel like the story and just the techniques and everything about it was so ahead of its time for being so groundbreaking that it can influence people to work with things that they have and be creative in the best type of way. Because it's it's a giant monkey movie by the end of it. It's a giant gorilla. But the sense of creativity that can inspire people to do. And I think that's what people need more of, is inspiration. That you can sit there and watch a movie I can watch a gangster movie and have two guys have a feud that they need to settle. That's not sparking my creativity. A giant monkey being taken out of his element and seeing what would happen and playing with nature and things like that, that's inspiring to see what else can come of this. Where else can this type of story go. And like, you know, rewatching it after not seeing it in so long, like really sparked that, like got the jogs moving of just like, oh, like what I want to do doesn't have to be a giant monkey necessarily, but it can be those same type of elements of being something out of order, out of nature, and messing with those laws and seeing what can come of it. So I think overall it is probably one of the most creative and inspiring stories that should be replacing Citizen Kane and be a mandatory watch for people just to see what they worked with, especially at that time period. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a national treasure.
How about you, Joe?
Well, whenever I reach the end of an endeavor, I always ask myself, what have I learned? And let's start off with what you've learned, the audience. Oh, there's the camera. Let's start off with what you've learned, the audience. No, okay. Number one, my advice to the audience is get Peter Jackson's King Kong, not to watch that, but to watch the supplemental materials. You're going to have to spend some bucks on the DVD or Blu-ray. Forget about the movie. I mean, the movie's okay. It has some interesting parts, but you have to watch that supplemental material that he made about the 1933 King Kong. There's a whole disc. There's a whole nother movie about the 1933 King Kong, which is awesome. Second thing is, if you want to see what the Bride of King Kong looks like, he has a girlfriend in King Kong Lives. So you get to see the girl King Kong walk around. It's pretty cool. The third thing is that the worst King Kong is King Kong versus Godzilla. It's the most horrible costume I've ever seen. I can't believe the makers of Godzilla just skimmed. It's like, we got the Godzilla costume ready to go. It's like, all right, where's the gorilla costume? What? Oh? What? Like, especially in Japan, when it's like, you're supposed to have, like, your work is your personal pride. Mm-hmm. And it's like they must have been committing harikari on that one, throwing themselves onto the sewers.
You know what the trade-off was, right? They had to shrink Godzilla. Godzilla was structurally bigger than King Kong. Yeah. He was the king of the monsters, and they had to scale him down to match King Kong.
I hate the big King. I like the King Kong that's only like 12 stories tall.
Yeah.
Like, I hate the King Kong that's like a million. It's like, come on, dude. What's he eating? Yeah. He ain't eating this whole... You know how many fucking calories he needs? God damn it.
I mean, that movie had to be made at some point. You know, Godzilla versus King Kong.
East versus West, and...
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't need to be made.
King Kong also got... King Kong, in that movie, King Kong also was powered up like Frankenstein's monster was. He got struck by a bolt of lightning and like gave him super strength, and he shoved a fucking tree down Godzilla's throat for some reason. But please, go on.
Oh, yeah. No, that's about it. I'm going to ask these guys to film some B-roll of my King Kong collection. They're only going to find this. This is so stupid. You probably want to edit this out, but, you know. All the little cutaways of the King Kong stuff. Okay. And in the end, what have you learned? Well, another thing that you are now learning is that all the cutaways, all the like, King Kong toys and the records and the trinkets was all stuff from my childhood that I collected over the years, because this film touched me like no other film in history. And, you know, for all the reasons that you guys have mentioned. And I now, thanks to Jill, look at this film from an entirely different point of view, from a character that I never really thought about too much. I mean, I thought about how frightened Fay Wray's character must have been. And, you know, I felt for her for what she was going through. But boy, oh boy, what Jill said, that to me is the heart of this whole show. So thank you, Jill. I now look at this movie in a whole new light, and I can rewatch it with a renewed goal. Thank you.
Of course.
I want to thank you, Joe, for joining us.
Oh, dude, it was my pleasure. We got to do this again. The Blob. The Blob awaits.
Yes.
What are we doing here? We got to do the Blob.
We're definitely doing the Blob.
I grew up in Phoenixville, so I know all about the Blob.
Oh, good.
We got married right around the corner from the Blob Theater.
Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you guys for watching this week's Kill of the Week, and we'll see you next time with a brand new episode. Cool. All right, now I can stop rolling.
Well, you're not going to see him with an old episode.